This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com and buildermasterclass.com. My name is Todd DeWalt, and it's my job to help you maximize profits and eliminate chaos. I've got a great interview for you today with Steve Kreitzberg from Apparatus Contractor Services, and here's what you're going to hear. You're going to hear about how Steve's background as spending a couple of decades as a professional customer or a professional buyer of construction services led him to solve a big problem, and about the business that he founded a few years ago. You're going to hear about what is one thing that Steve believes to be true about business that's a little unconventional. We'll talk about what's the difference between a CPA and a bookkeeper. There's a myth about QuickBooks, online versus desktop, that you need to know about. And then we'll talk about some of the biggest bookkeeping mistakes that you could be making, including mixing personal and business finances, not getting your job cost tracked properly, and how you might be handling your workers as 1099s and how they really need to be handled as employees. We talk about how clarity is the gateway to confidence. Steve talks about what it means to have the, quote, always be the buyer attitude, how you get to choose your customer. We discuss some of the physics of building a business and why growth problems in a business are considered badges of success by his team. Great stuff. You're going to get a lot out of this, and we'll get to that interview in just a few minutes. Before we do that, I do have a couple of resources that you might get some value from. What's holding you back from experiencing hypergrowth in your construction business? Likely it's poor cash flow. Happens all the time. Moving money from one project to fund materials for your next. But that's all changing. Build will pay your supplier in cash up front and then extend you 120-day terms. Finally, a pay-when-paid solution for contractors so you can experience the confidence to bid on projects you never thought you could. The folks at Build hear it all the time. I wish I had heard about Build sooner. So what are you waiting for? Head over to build.com/CLE and have your materials funded as quickly as same day. That's BILLD.com/CLE. I don't want my competition to know about CoConstruct because it gives me an edge over them. That's what one custom home builder told me after using CoConstruct for a couple of years. I referred one of my coaching clients who's a custom home builder to CoConstruct, and after using it for a couple of weeks, he said, the ability to schedule projects weeks in advance has been an absolute game changer. And there's all sorts of other things that CoConstruct does for you. It basically lets you run your entire business on one piece of software. Using CoConstruct means you'll be able to manage your projects with more profits, less chaos, and maybe even with less people. And there are two unexpected benefits to being a CoConstruct user. Number one, it gives you access and membership into a community of other builders where you can share best practices, bounce ideas off each other. And then number two, CoConstruct is not just a software company. They don't want to just sell you software. They will help you become a better builder and better at business. As one builder told me, quote, CoConstruct cares about my bottom line, not just theirs, end quote. So if you're a home builder, remodeler, general contractor, and you want to up your game, reduce chaos, increase profits, then go to constructionleadingedge.com/CoConstruct. See what CoConstruct can do for you. If you sign up, make sure and tell them that I sent you, and then I'm going to load you up with some bonuses, some templates that will help you get up the learning curve even faster. But go to constructionleadingedge.com/CoConstruct and see what it can do for you. All right, without further ado, let's jump into my interview with Steve Kreitzberg. Enjoy. Steve, welcome to the podcast. How's it going today?
It's going well, Todd. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
You bet. So we're going to get into some of your varied background, how you're working with construction businesses to help solve big problems that most of them have, quite frankly, some of whom may not know the problems they have, and we're going to talk about those as well. But let's go back to the beginning, not all the way to the beginning, but talk about your career And what did your I've known you for a couple of years, and honestly, I don't even know exactly how you got to
Yeah.
where you're at, but talk
Yeah.
about your career and what has led you to where you're at today.
All right. Well, it's a fair question. I went to engineering school and graduated with a mechanical engineering degree in the early 80s. I then went on and worked for Hewlett Packard in their computer group, managing manufacturing engineering and some development engineering for a number of years. And I left the computer industry in the early 90s to start what became the first of a series of real estate related companies. So the first of those was a company that actually became one of the largest buyers and renovators of single family housing, even before the concept of flipping was known as it is today. That business led to a brokerage, which also then led to a management company. And my most ambitious real estate project is still continuing, and that is a company that buys and holds large scale industrial property. And what was common about all of those businesses is I've spent, therefore, about 30 years of my career being completely dependent on contractors. Every one of those businesses had at its core the need to find and work with and, frankly, develop good contractors.
So that gives you an interesting perspective from I've heard some people say your customers aren't professional customers, but guys like you are professional customers. So what are some of the most common trends, some of the biggest problems that you saw consistently with contractors from a customer standpoint that might surprise contractors?
Unfortunately, I don't think this will surprise them because the theme is so strong. But I found, and I still find, going all the way back 30 years, some of my best contractors, the guys that were just absolute geniuses at their trade, really struggled and still struggle with keeping basically the administration side of their business running smoothly. So and we all see those patterns. They get busy and they stop answering the phone because they don't have the infrastructure necessary to keep the growth going. And when they do start to grow, they jettison the time that's spent on keeping track and focus, as they should, on customers and serving the commitments that they've made. But the result is that my experience as like you say, a professional customer of contractors is that some of my best guys, we'd be sending them notices saying, could you please invoice us? We owe you money. Could you please wrap up the paperwork side of this so we can get you paid? And actually, we paid that bill, but it appears you've applied it against the wrong invoice. So let me share your books here and let's get this sorted out. Just helping them along the way because they do such a great job in their core trade and such an abysmal job keeping score. And that really it was and was the impetus for what became Apparatus.
And what sort of ripple effects did that poor administration have on you as the customer? What effect did it have on your business?
Well, and hopefully most contractors understand this, but I fear that a lot of them don't. Even the best technician, if they can't keep track of the billing and the paperwork, you put yourself at risk when you hire them. So if we were involved in a project that had, as an example, outside capital, it wasn't just enough to maintain schedule on our various companies and our various projects. It was to have the confidence that we were up to date on the financial side of the business. And if we had to, in essence, apologize for the lack of financial sophistication of our own contractors, that can create a problem. So there's the negative effect. There's also what I would call simply the lost opportunity. Contractors cannot underestimate how often they miss opportunities, and I mean collaborations, partnerships, joint ventures, if they don't have their feet solidly under them on their finances, because people who have those opportunities and are looking for those kind of partnerships are going to pass them by, even if they're really good contractors, if they don't have their financial house in order.
Yeah, you said an important word, confidence.
Yeah.
And I've worked in real estate development, and I've done a couple of episodes about how real estate deals get financed. There are outside capital sources, and then there's
Yes.
a development partner, and then there's the contractor. And it's not just about the ability to assemble bricks and sticks. It's really about confidence.
It is.
And I can tell you, as a longtime owner's rep doing commercial real estate development, there's no way I would sign a contract with a contractor that I didn't have confidence in. If they didn't know their numbers, and the way I would say it is, we worked with one large national general contractor who was accused of being an accounting firm that did construction, but it was probably their ability to do the project accounting was as important to us as their ability to get the work done. And I think a lot of contractors overlook that. They underestimate the importance of the financials and providing their partners confidence.
Well, and there's another layer to that. It's not only providing their partners with that confidence, but there's an old piece of wisdom that says that most things in life are not about you. There is a dimension of life that is absolutely all about you. And that is that if you're running a business and you don't know where you stand, you don't know where you are with your cash flow, you don't know where you are with your payables, that lack of confidence, that lack of clarity, which then leads to that lack of confidence, bleeds through in your own mindset, which then ripples outward in all your communications. The way you communicate to your team is affected by that lack of confidence, the way you communicate to that next potential customer. So if you think that you're keeping a secret, that you lack confidence in your own financials, it is a very poorly kept secret. And it is having effects in the way that you go about your daily life as a contractor that you cannot imagine, that is absolutely affecting your future. And I think people underestimate that, because we all know that the opposite is true. When you've really got your stuff together, where you really know where you are, you've got that bounce in your step, it's almost a form of swagger, and it flows outward. Your team can feel it, which is why they stay with you. Your customers can feel it, which is why they say yes to you. Your partners can feel it, why they keep bringing opportunities to you. And again, this is one of these things that people really need to accept. It is an important part of how they operate every day.
Yeah. I want to talk about mindset. I talk a lot about mindset, but you mentioned that, so I'd like to come back to that for a moment. But I've had this, and I love the point about confidence and how it bleeds through. And what I found is that when you have good systems in place, we're mutual friends with Co-Construct, for example.
Right.
What I've said to people, if I had to boil down, if I had to answer the question, Co-Construct means fill in the blank with one word to a builder or remodeler, it's confidence.
Yeah, there you go.
And when you have confidence, when you have clarity, maybe it's clarity. I'm not sure which one comes first.
I think clarity comes first and leads to that confidence. Yeah.
Yep. So when you have clarity, you know your numbers, you know you've got it. That gives you the confidence to make hires, bid on projects.
Yes.
And it has such a ripple effect. And knowing your numbers. In this, we're going to talk about the importance of bookkeeping for contractors and some of the mistakes. But having that clarity means confidence, which just can't be, the importance of which can't be overstated.
I agree.
So let's talk about mindset. As a professional buyer of construction services for a long time, what were some of the more troubling mindsets of contractors that you ran into, if there are any?
Well, there are. And by the way, the mindset that I think is the most important to retain, and this is part of what goes on in my head every day and what I would recommend to any other contractor, and I absolutely recommend to all of my clients. It's what I call always be the buyer, because the buyer can always walk away. So if you carry around in your head that you are the buyer and you can always walk away, that immediately gives you an endorphin rush of confidence, because in any situation, you're saying to yourself, I'm not compelled to do anything here. I have total choice in whether I take this customer. I have total choice in whether I hire this sub. I have total choice in whether or not this guy becomes part of my team. And if even when you're selling to a customer, your attitude is, I'm the buyer, that also bleeds through. I'll talk about this in a moment, but Apparatus recruits clients, which means we select them. We invite them to participate with us as a client, because one of the things that other business people have learned, the choices you make in who you allow to be your customers are some of the most important choices you make. And I think that's also part of this general mindset of always be the buyer. And every time I saw a contractor that I was trying to work with get in trouble, they were violating that rule in some way. They were desperate enough to take on a customer they shouldn't have taken on. They were spending money paying the bills on the last job with the advances from the next job, instead of standing back and realizing, you know what, I've got a problem here that I need to sort out. So these things that erode your confidence, I think it all flows down from, if I always in every situation take the attitude that I am the buyer because I can walk away, it's amazing how quickly problems smooth themselves out.
Yeah, what I found is when you get into that scarcity mindset, when you have to take whatever comes along,
Yes.
your planning horizon gets really short.
Yes.
And you don't know if there will be another deal. You have to take whatever comes along, and that means you get diluted and you get shiny object syndrome and all sorts of problems.
That's right.
Come from that. But yeah, that's interesting. The always be the buyer attitude. You made a statement about choosing your customer. Can you restate that? Because I think people need to hear that again.
Yeah, well, we all have come to realize as business people that most of our headaches, probably 95% of our headaches, come from about 20% of the customer relationships that we enter into. So how amazing would it be if you got very good at not bringing aboard those 20% of customers that create nearly all your headaches? And that begins by understanding that you are the buyer, that you choose your own customers. And you have to get very clear in your head what you're looking for in your customers or clients. And you develop really a model. And if that customer or client fits that model, you're ready to go to work with them. And I say with them, not for them, because again, part of that attitude is, I'm going to partner with this client or customer to achieve the goals that they have because I have skills to bring to the table. But I'm not going to enter into a partnership that is going to lead me to the kind of headaches that make me hate my job. Every contractor has woken up on some morning and said, this sucks. And if they really trace that back, they're going to find that it sucks because of the people they've gotten involved with. Because chances are they're damn good at their trade and they love doing it. But the people make it really tough if you choose the wrong people.
Yeah. And that requires some ownership to realize it is as you mentioned, it's a mindset shift.
It is.
To think, okay, I get to choose. I have a choice. I heard the guy who was the basis of the movie The Pursuit of Happiness, Chris Gardner. He was homeless, had a young child, sleeping in a bus station or a subway station bathroom. And he said one day he was standing in that bathroom, his son was asleep on the floor, and he's looking at this polished piece of stainless steel that was the mirror. And he kept asking himself, how did I get here?
Yeah.
How did I get here? How did I get here?
Yeah,
and finally he said, you know what? I drove here. I drove here. I got myself here. And that was the moment that he could start to fix it, because until then, all of the problems were out there. It was the world, the economy, the whatever. But once he said, okay, I drove here, then he had the power to actually do something about it.
Yeah, that's right.
And speaking of firing customers, I've had this conversation with a few of my coaching clients recently, and I've asked them, I've said the same thing. Chances are that 80% of your problems are coming from 20% of your clients. You need to fire those clients.
Yes.
And then
And build a system that ensures that you don't hire any of them like that again. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Good stuff. Okay. So we've talked a little bit, we've teased a little bit about Apparatus Contractor Services, but what led you to start this company? And then we'll get into what it actually is.
Yeah. It goes back to that history of being, as you put it, a professional client of contractors through all of my real estate related businesses. And that's still true to this day. So very early on, I got that engineering degree. While I was at HP, I got an MBA in finance, which was a great combination to have as a technical manager in the computer industry. But it also gave me a great foundation as I left corporate America to start my own companies. So with that background in finance and that recognition that these great contractors were struggling mightily because they didn't have a core set of skills that they really needed, probably 20 years ago, I began saying to myself and maybe to others, somebody someday ought to build out an accounting and bookkeeping company that just serves contractors. These guys really need that help. So that notion was rattling around in my skull for years, but it didn't really become actionable until probably the last 4 or 5 years. And what happened in the last 4 or 5 years is critical tools like Dropbox for file sharing, Quickbooks Online for cloud-based bookkeeping, tools like Zoom, which are not all that new, frankly, but now they're ubiquitous. But a cluster of technology came together that allowed us then to pull the trigger on Apparatus. And the way that I describe Apparatus is really by answering 4 questions. What clients do we serve? What problem do we solve? What tools do we use to solve that problem? And what promise do we make? So I'll go through each of those. The clients that we serve then are general and specialty contractors. That's it. It is a very narrow and very deep focus on people that are running construction industry businesses. But like I said, we recruit clients and choose them when they come aboard. And that means we get approached by a lot more folks than we take on as clients. And that's important because it has to be a match that works really well. What I look for more than anything else in a prospect is, are they growth centered? If they come at me and basically they're solving their bookkeeping problem because it's a necessary evil, we're not the right answer. If instead they're coming at me saying, I've got big aspirations and big skills to grow this business, but I've got to get my foundation right. I've got to get my bookkeeping figured out, or I can't get to where I want to be. That's the guy I want to work with, who is committed to growth and recognizes this is a barrier to growth. We also look for guys and gals that are coachable. Do they make it a habit of reaching out and finding new information and adopting it? Are they goal-driven? Are they decisive? Are they collaborative? And finally, they have to be what I call cash confident. If they are struggling day to day to make the finances work, it isn't going to work out for us as a service provider to them. So that's the clients that we serve. Then what problem do we solve? Well, what we're really doing is back to this idea of clarity as the gateway to confidence, is we're helping people blast through what I would call a ceiling of complexity. Every contractor gets to a point where their growth is limited by their clarity, which then, again, as we talked about, that chain reaction into confidence. They get to the point where they know they've lost control. And there are certain things in life, maybe downhill skiing, where moving just at the edge of control can be exhilarating, but running a business that way is a catastrophe waiting to happen. So we're helping them get back in control so they can blast through that ceiling of complexity. And these are guys that don't have the time, they don't have the expertise, they don't have the passion for doing the books. And guess what? They shouldn't be doing them anyway. This is a role they should be delegating, whether they delegate it internally or delegate it through a third party like us. They shouldn't be doing it themselves. So that's the problem that we solve. Then the tools that we use, we've built out the entire Apparatus platform, and we serve clients all over the country using QuickBooks Online, and then the QuickBooks payroll system, and then T-Sheets, which is owned by Intuit, and that's the digital time tracking. Because what we do is bookkeeping, payroll, and reporting for contractors only. That's it. And that tool set, QBO and QB payroll and T-Sheets, combined then with Zoom and Dropbox and email, et cetera, gives us that platform to do it. Then finally, the promise that we make is basically we'll take one of our clients and we'll build out and then operate a precision set of books for them that they understand, that's useful to them, and we'll do it in about 6 weeks from no matter where they are starting, whether they have no books at all. And we've been approached by folks running $3 or $4 million construction businesses out of a checkbook. I mean, these people are superhuman, but they can definitely be helped along. And when they get that foundation under them, imagine how fast they grow. So that promise has a couple of components to it. This set of books is going to be structured. We move everybody to the chart of accounts developed by the National Association of Home Builders. So it's the NAHB chart of accounts, either a remodeler or a spec builder, whichever is most appropriate. And then it's going to be accurate, meaning we're going to be doing the allocation of revenue and costs to the right line items on the chart of accounts and the right customers or columns, if you think about it that way. It's going to be up to date. We teach our clients how to get us the information in real time so that their books constantly reflect the accurate operations of their business. And it's going to be clear. We teach them how to read the reports, and then we set up an automated system where every Sunday night they get a standard set of 5 basic reports that we teach them how to read. And what I say to these guys is, look, give yourself 15 minutes every Monday morning. Look at these reports. At first, they'll be fuzzy and incomprehensible, but trust me, as the days go by, you will start to see patterns, you will start to make decisions, and that's when you're starting to build on that foundation we've given you. And finally, it's going to be accessible. QBO, because it's web-based, has a great phone app that we teach our people how to use, giving them real-time access to their own books. We obviously don't have them spending a lot of time in their books. We're doing that for them. But they own that set of books, and our arrangement with all of our clients is a 30-day contract that auto-renews every 30 days unless they say to me, hey, Steve, I've got to make a change, or unless I say to them, hey, Tom, I've got to make a change. This isn't working for Apparatus. So that's the promise that we make.
Gotcha. You said that your clients need to be coachable.
Yes.
Ultimately, there's some behavior change that has to take place. It's not, although it would be great just to be able to write a check, sign an agreement, and then things just magically happen.
Right.
What does coachable look like, or what are some red flags you look for that would indicate somebody is not coachable, however you want to approach that question?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we do watch for that because we're building out a system that is for contractors only. And again, I'm an engineer with a background in finance. So no surprise, we've built a highly structured model so we can deploy it and make it cost effective and serve lots and lots of clients. You can see then why I don't do bookkeeping for restaurants or veterinary clinics or any other type of business, because we're going very narrow and very deep, which means that we teach our clients. We actually have a boot camp that they go through as part of their onboarding. It's 6 stages of education, because we're taking them through a bit of a transformation. Like you said, we're giving them new skills so that they know what it is we're doing on their behalf. It's quite literally, we are educating them so that as they delegate back to us, they understand the role that we're playing and they understand the role they continue to play. a metaphor that I use is we build a bridge between their company and our company, and we have people on our side of the bridge working continuously with people on their side of the bridge. And for a small construction company, what I say to these guys is if you can dedicate a half an hour a day of your time or someone on your team that you trust, getting us the information that we need, coded receipts that we teach them how to code and transfer to us, bank statements, copies of bills, copies of invoices. So we're teaching them a set of behaviors that allow us then to deliver that service. If they rebel, if they won't, in essence, recognize that there's a certain way that we operate with all of our clients, and it's going to be critical for them to adopt that set of behaviors, we're polite about it, but we just can't work with it. We say, you know what? I realize this isn't how you want to work, but it's how we need to work. So if we can't reconcile this, then we're just going to have to help you find some other source for your bookkeeping. And that happens. I basically look for a client in my group every month that I let go. And I do that because there's always somebody at the bottom of the stack, and I do it as an empowerment tool for my own team. As we raise our standards and get our folks trained and they succeed, we shouldn't be spending time with the folks that are not willing to be helped. And that's really what it comes down to. And we don't just cut them off. We work with them to find an alternative bookkeeping service, and then we move them out that way.
Yeah, great way to look at it. One sidebar question that I think would be an interesting topic to talk about for a few minutes. You mentioned that you specifically chose to go narrow and deep on working with contractors.
Yes.
What conceptually or philosophically, from a business standpoint, what are the benefits of really niching down as opposed to going broad? Maybe it's specific to builders or in business in general, but if you would talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, that's a great topic. It's something big enough to dedicate an entire podcast to, but I'll touch on it briefly. If you look under the hood at what I've done in my entrepreneurial career, you'll see I'm basically a parallel entrepreneur, which means I start one company, I get it running, and I start a parallel company without shutting down the first one. And what I've learned through a sequence of starting these parallel companies is that each one has a unique name and each one has a unique client focus. And it always starts out a little wider and then I narrow it down. And the reason is just the physics of building a company. If you can't really define narrowly who it is you serve, and getting back to my other policy about always being the buyer, once I really understand who I'm serving, something kind of magical happens. I get very focused on going and finding those people. And when they find me, they know that I'm the solution to their problem. I'll use a metaphor that we would all understand. Nobody's going to hire a divorce attorney if they're in an auto accident or being sued. And if they do hire a divorce attorney, they've made a mistake, and every one of us kind of understands that. Every business operates that same way. The narrower you are, the more able you are going to be to find just those customers that meet your specifications, what we call the right fit client. Get very clear about that right fit client. We've done that with every one of our businesses. My management company is very narrow in what it does. The brokerage is very narrow. The development company is very narrow, because the mechanics of getting narrow and learning who your right fit client is. And now what's happening is you've defined a group of people you want to be a hero to, and they know it when they find you. So at first it feels like being narrow is going to cut you off from opportunity. The opposite is actually true. You're sending out radio waves into the community that if this is you represent our right fit client, and people like that find you and come toward you. What's happening right now, when this podcast is airing, there are people on this podcast that are listening right now that know they are not my client. And likewise, there are people on this podcast listening right now that are saying, you know what? this outfit apparatus might be exactly what I was looking for. So I've actually sharpened their interest while, in essence, in a gentle way, repelling the clients that wouldn't have been a good fit anyway. And it isn't arrogance. People think, and they're hesitant to do it. Gee, how can you get so picky about your clients? Isn't that really arrogant? No, you're doing a service to these clients by being very narrow and not taking on a client that I don't want to take on a client that I don't know for sure I can knock it out of the park for them. And the narrower I get, the more of them there are.
Yeah, that is so counterintuitive and so true. So many people are afraid to say no to the bad clients. They're afraid to say no to opportunities that come in. But what I found is that when you say no, when you make a firm decision on the niche that you're going to focus on, I can't explain it. Maybe it's just because of your focus. Maybe it's because of the universe. Maybe it's God, whatever you want to attribute it to. But more of those opportunities that you focused on will come your way. And
they will.
And you can't, I don't think you can really be successful without it, just for a variety of reasons. But fascinating topic. While we're talking about business philosophy, what's one thing that you believe about business that some people might consider unconventional, maybe even say that Steve guy's crazy for believing that?
I don't think I can get to crazy because I don't think this is crazy, but I think it is
crazy. Listen, crazy people never say they're crazy, Steve.
Well, I guess that's true. Yeah, that's true. I think this is a little counterintuitive, but any entrepreneur can resonate with this point. When you go to start a business, it is never about money. And in a lot of ways, it is not about your clients, even though you are passionately interested in being a hero, and it's easier to be a hero the narrower your client gets. Ultimately, starting a business, whether you do one or several, is about freedom. It's about freedom of time. It's about freedom of money. It's about freedom of relationship, and it's about freedom of purpose. You get all four of those freedoms. And the more success you see as an entrepreneur, the first thing you realize is my company got bigger, I'm making more money, but my lifestyle isn't changing, actually. I'm not in this for the money, and things are going great. I'm in it for the freedom. And I'll say it again, it's freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of relationship, and freedom of purpose. Yeah.
This will.
I hope that's not crazy.
No, I think it is unconventional to say it's not about money and it's not about clients. I think there are some people listening to this who are putting their happiness on the other side of achieving something with their business. Yes. There's all this talk about grow a 6-figure business, grow a 7-figure business. I can tell you, I can speak from experience. I have placed happiness on the other side of financial goals and deals, and it's not there. That is it's a fool's errand. It's like chasing the wind. So just be careful what you put on the other side of those targets. And I would say, freedom is what it's about. I've had really good years, financially speaking, and really bad years. And I've achieved lots of financial targets. And I can tell you that life doesn't change that much because of if you have a couple of more zeros on your bank statements. But it really is about freedom. So good stuff.
And I've been asked this before. If you were to, if there's somebody listening to this right now and they're saying, but I can barely pay the bills. I'm really struggling. I've got a client that's mad at me. I've got supplier problems. I've got all the realities of life when you get into the real world. But the breakthrough to get to those freedoms, I think actually begins with freedom of relationship. So I get back to my mantra of choosing your customers, choosing your team, choosing your subs. If all you do is commit to yourself that tomorrow morning, I'm not going to have any further discussion with someone that I don't really believe is going to be the right client or customer for me, you're already on the path to that breakthrough. Because guess what's going to happen? You're not going to waste time on that customer you shouldn't get anyway, and you're going to have time to go find more of those customers. And if you don't know who they are, Sit down, take out a sheet of paper and spend 30 minutes and just say to yourself, who are the 5 clients that I really enjoyed working with the most? And then ask yourself, where did I find them? What were they like? Where would I find more of them? Who are these people and where do they hang out? And the more you delve into that, but it all starts with choosing narrow. Yeah. But you'll find the patterns are there, that people like that. Because guess what? Your best clients know each other too. That's the other thing that's fascinating.
Yeah, I think the key is a choice. When you make a decision, when you decide, you know what, as you said, I'm done with this difficult customer. It's amazing what happens to your anxiety level.
Oh my gosh.
When you make a decision, if you're dealing with anxiety, then start making decisions.
That's right.
Get off the fence. Just make micro decisions if you have to. I wouldn't recommend making enormous life-changing decisions if you're in a crisis, but you have to get this flywheel of confidence and momentum started, and you do it by making decisions. And It's amazing what happens when you do that.
That's right.
Good stuff. All right, so let's talk about bookkeeping. There's some confusion about the difference between a CPA and a bookkeeper. Who does what? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to think about it is the bookkeeper keeps score, and you're going to use CPAs to file your taxes and to develop what might be more elaborate financial strategy for you as you grow. But in the simplest sense, what you're hiring a bookkeeping company like Apparatus to do is make sure that scorekeeping is happening in near real time. So you're very much aware of the financial status of your company at large and each project that you're working on. Because if you don't know those numbers, if I don't know exactly what I made on that last kitchen remodel and why I made money on that job, then whatever mistakes I made are going to get carried forward into the very next bid that I'm going to produce, or I'm going to lack the information necessary to know how to be aggressive in a particular area on that next bid, or the confidence to know when the customer asks, can you adjust your price, you're able to say yes, or you have the confidence to stand your ground and say no. So bookkeeping is about scorekeeping, CPAs are about taxes and financial structure as you grow.
Got it. What are some common myths or misconceptions specifically about outsourced bookkeeping? I've run into this a lot where people feel like, well, maybe some of the myths are, I have to do my own books. Nobody else can do it like me. There's no way. Well, the only way I could have somebody else do my books is if they're sitting at my desk using my computer in my office. But what are some of the other misconceptions that you hear most commonly about outsourced bookkeeping?
Yeah, perhaps it's not related to the outsourced as much as there was a period of time, you heard me say that we built all of Apparatus's tool set on QuickBooks Online. There is a large cadre of contractors that have been taught to believe that you can't do certain things on QBO, QuickBooks Online. And that was true. When Intuit first rolled out QBO, it was a very skinny, very limited capability. But if you look under the hood at Intuit, all of their investment is going into QuickBooks Online, and they are gradually bolstering its capability, and it's becoming more and more sophisticated. Literally every quarter they roll out new capabilities. And for them, it's just a business model thing. They're getting out of the business of shrink-wrapped software that they can sell by the disk. They're now selling a subscription model. So when I buy QBO files to run my clients on, I'm entering into in essence, a monthly contract with Intuit to buy that service on a monthly basis. So they're rolling that out across millions and millions of clients. But that persistent myth that you can't do what you need to do for a contracting company on QuickBooks Online is just not true. Or there's another dimension to that. And there's that old bit of wisdom that says that any knucklehead can make something complicated. It takes real genius to keep it simple. We encounter clients all the time who have a tendency to want to make things really complicated. And so what we find ourselves doing is giving them a pathway where they crawl before they walk and they walk before they run, because it is complicated if you make it complicated. But the vast majority of operating construction companies need very simple, clean books on a clean chart of accounts with the proper structure and weekly reports. And if they have those things, they've probably solved about 95% of the things that are causing them that ceiling of complexity that I talked about before.
It's interesting. I just had a call with someone this morning who was told by a CPA that QuickBooks Online would not allow them to do what they wanted to do,
right?
That only QuickBooks Desktop would allow. So perhaps that statement was true a few years ago, but it's not right. The case. That's good to know. Okay, let's talk about, I've done some research and found a few of the most common bookkeeping mistakes that small business owners make, and I'd like for you to expand on why they are such a big problem. I think one of the reasons they're such a big problem is because people don't think they're a big problem.
That's
and
right.
They don't understand.
Yeah, that's right.
So number one is mixing personal and business finances. I've seen it. I'm probably guilty of it early in my business career, but why is that such a big problem?
Well, let's start with entity structure for a moment because it ties in. If you are a sole proprietorship, in other words, you have not created a separate legal entity to act as a vessel for your business, it's really tempting to run a sole proprietorship as basically a second version of you. And now you're using the same checkbook to pay your mortgage that you are to pay the lease payment on your work truck or to buy tools, et cetera. And the first problem with that is you simply lose track. You have no concept of the actual financial performance of your business. The second thing that happens is you are lining yourself up even more than a sole proprietorship does naturally for the risk of a lawsuit wiping your business and all your personal assets off the playing field in a clean sweep. If you are running an LLC or an S Corp or a C Corp, and you are still mixing your personal and your business finances, you still have all the problems that I described before about losing track of the independent financial operational identity of your business. You don't know how it's performing. But now you've created the opportunity for an enterprising attorney, and there are thousands of them, that will take the fact that you are not making a distinction between the operations of your entity and your personal operations, and they do what's called piercing the veil. They sue your entity, they sue your LLC for a construction defect. They then make the case that your LLC is an alter ego for you personally, which is called piercing the veil. When they achieve and win that argument, now all the assets of your LLC are attached by the judgment they get against you, and all of your personal assets, your vacation home, your primary home, your automobiles. So you're playing for all the marbles here, and keeping those finances distinct is so easy to do that there just isn't any excuse to put yourself at risk, whether you're a sole prop or an entity.
The other big mistake people make, especially construction business owners, is not tracking job costs.
Right.
What are the ripple effects of this?
Yeah, let me describe the way that I do to my clients. Think of a set of books as like a spreadsheet. It's a grid, and the rows are the chart of accounts, revenue lines, cost of sales lines, expense lines, etc. And the columns should be your individual projects. But if you think about a single column, it's now your whole company. All the revenue is going into one cell on that grid. It's going in the revenue line in the company column. All of your construction direct labor is going into a single cell. All of your direct material and all of your G&A spending. And if you have a set of books like that, you'll know what the company is doing because you'll see total revenue, total direct labor, total direct material, total G&A spending, other costs, and therefore you'll see total net income. But you'll actually know very little about how to guide your company forward, keeping score that way. What we do then is we set you up inside QuickBooks Online so you're tracking at the project level. And the way to think about that is I've grabbed that single column in the middle and I've pulled it sideways like an accordion. And now I've got lots of columns. When you add all the columns back up, when you collapse them, it's still your whole company. But when you pull them apart, the first column is now just G&A spending. That spending, which exists whether you have a customer to work for or not, your cell bill, your office lease, the lease on your personal vehicle if you have one. So that's in your G&A column. Then every column after that should be a customer. So I'm working on the Smith kitchen remodel. That becomes a column in my set of books. And again, we do this inside QuickBooks Online, but this physical metaphor of a spreadsheet is a really good way to look at it. But now what I'm able to see on that Smith remodel is exactly how much revenue I got from the Smith family, exactly how much material I spent on that build, and exactly how much direct labor. And I can go in deeper. I won't get into it here, but we have a tool we call Microscope, which is a service that Apparatus can provide that allows you to drill even deeper. But the point is I'm now able to see, okay, I had a total of $200,000 of revenue on that kitchen remodel. I had $60,000 in material. I had $40,000 of direct labor. I had other costs. I can carry all that down and see exactly what my net income was on that project. And I can do that project by project. And now I know where I'm making money. I know where I'm losing money. I know why. I know the customers that I'm actually paying to work for. And I know the types of customers where my margin is really good. And the moment you start doing that, imagine a plumbing shop that's doing a lot of small work, and then they're doing a lot of replumbs or a lot of new construction work. If they're not looking at those as independent projects, they really have no idea where their actual margin is coming from. Europeans have a great term for revenue. They call it turnover. I love that term because revenue is meaningless. What makes sense is net income. And if I'm tracking net income at a project level, then I really know what is actually causing my company to succeed. The other thing that happens is, trust me, you start pulling out a column that's just G&A and you see what you're spending just to be open for business every month. That'll get you making changes immediately too.
Yeah, speaking of that, let's talk about what's your guidance on distributing G&A or overhead costs across projects? Do you suggest doing that, or I've seen a few different models on that. What's your approach?
I think that is in the repertoire of items that they need to get to. In other words, it is on the list of important changes to make, but it's not early on that list. And the reason I say that is until their G&A stabilizes, in other words, they've really got things kind of smoothed out, and until they have a fairly decent level of confidence in the rate at which they're bringing in projects, then they can have a conversation with their CPA or with a coach like you about, okay, if I wanted to do G&A allocation, the goal being that at the end of every time slice, whether it's 30 days or a quarter or a year, I've taken everything that's in that G&A column and I have, by some rational mechanism, allocated it out to my projects. That's my goal. Well, what is that mechanism? Am I allocating based on the revenue of each project? Am I allocating based on the weeks that it took my team to complete the project? Am I allocating it based on some other metric, maybe direct labor hours? So I think it's on the list, but to me, that gets under the heading of running sometimes before we're walking. What is urgent, and what we work on with our folks immediately, we take on a lot of guys that are making two real-time mistakes that we try to help them get fixed right away. One is they are running what the IRS would consider an employee, and they're 1099ing and paying them as a contractor. The IRS and the states have a very clear set of guidelines that define what an employee is. And if you've got people on your team that would meet the IRS test of being an employee and you're 1099ing them like they're a contractor, you are one disgruntled conversation away from having a whole lot of headaches from the state or from the IRS. So getting people to clean up those relationships and recognize that, look, if this guy's a captive shop, if he's the finished carpenter that only works for you and you keep him busy year round, he's an employee. It's time to make right and get him W-2'd so you're doing withholding, et cetera, because if something goes off the rails, the IRS will hold you to having done that, even if you didn't, and now you've got big checks to write. The other problem that we try to solve for people right away is getting them to be a W-2'd employee of their own shop. So move them off of sole proprietorship, get them to hire an attorney and get them to take on the status of at least an LLC, which is usually the right answer anyway. And if they're already an entity, get them to be a W-2'd employee, get them out of the habit of reaching into the cash drawer and taking draws, because we all know the problems that creates. Number one, if you're taking draws, you're confusing cash flow and profit, and you can't distinguish. It all looks like money in the cash drawer. The other thing that happens if you're taking draws, you're doing it when you feel flush. You're not doing it when you're a little bit thin, and it's ripsawing up and down, which now you, again, have lost control of your confidence that you know where you are with your cash flow. Yet another problem is if you're W-2'd and you put yourself on a salary, even a small one, at least then by the end of the year, you've paid Uncle Sam, you've paid the state, you've paid the local government for all of that money that you've drawn. If you still take a draw, and you can, then you'll have tax liability on that draw. But at least that portion of what you've taken out of your business as salary is covered by the taxation. The final point is, guess what? Unless your company can operate without you, in other words, if you walk out the door tomorrow and your company continue, you are a cost of that company's operations. You better reflect that on the P&L. So now you're a W-2'd employee that is part of the cost structure of that operating company. And now you are seeing the true financial performance, because if you weren't doing that task, you'd have to hire somebody who is. So there's a whole host of problems that get solved. I would say that problem is top of the list.
Good stuff. Well, this has been fantastic. Lots of actionable stuff. Could be a little bit of an alarm, maybe a wake-up call for some of you listening. Perhaps you've put off some issues. Maybe you have some messes that need to be cleaned up. Maybe you're saying, "Oh, yeah, I have commingled funds between personal and business. I have no idea what projects work for me. I need to fire some customers, but I don't know who the most profitable ones are." So this has been an interesting conversation, maybe a little frustrating for some folks, but the key is to take some action.
Yeah, and I'll give you a good metaphor here. Mm-hmm. This is about flying an airplane and fixing it in flight. Mm. We would not recommend that you land the plane and taxi into the ramp area and break out the tools. That's not how your company is going to operate. What we do with all of our clients is we recognize, look, this is a plane in flight. Let's maintain heading. Let's maintain altitude. Let's get out on the wings and start making changes. Let's, start making the changes, because all of this is about that old adage of progress, not perfection. Let's understand where the problems areas are, start a campaign of fixing them while we keep flying that plane. And you'd be stunned how much progress you can make once you have the clarity of what those problems are and you have the priority of which ones you want to work on. And if all you're doing is saying, in the next 30 days, I'm going to work on this problem, and then the next 30 days, I'm going to work on this problem. We've all got all the time in the world if we are taking action, like you just said, Todd. What causes us to run out of time is when that plane stalls. You run out of fuel, some mechanical breakdown that takes it out of the sky. Now you're out of the game. But right now, if you're still in the game, we can fix this airplane in flight.
Yeah, that's incredibly important, that you can't fix everything at once. And it's very empowering to know what the priorities are, because you can only fix one thing at a time. And I do the same thing with my clients with other parts of their business. Let's find where the most chaos is and let's work on that. And let's get that, not perfect, but let's get it 80 to 90%.
That's right.
Get to the point where it makes sense to jump to something else. And then maybe you've been dealing with really painful situations for the last 6 months, but it's because you're not taking action.
That's right.
And if you'll get to the root cause and stop complaining about the symptoms, it's amazing what you can get done in a really short time. And I've seen some businesses turn around in 6 months, and they are dealing with challenges of growth that they never thought were possible 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
and those are great problems to have.
Yes, those are new problems associated with growth. How do I find more people? What systems do I put in place to support this growth? Those are the kind of problems that business owners should be causing for their business. So, Steve, this has been great. I appreciate the time. If people want to find out more about your company, learn more about what you can do for them, and potentially apply and see if they're a good fit, then where should they go?
They go to a website, the name of which is ApparatusTeam.com, ApparatusTeam.com, and that'll land you right on the homepage. You'll see a tab that says, who do we serve? You'll see a tab that says, what do we do? You'll see a tab that says pricing. And there's a tab on there that says become a client. And there is a 4-step process that you go through to apply to become a client. Part of that is watching a 35-minute video where I go into kind of excruciating detail about what we do and what we need you to do as a client. And once folks have gone through those 4 steps, they'll really understand whether they're the right fit for us and whether, importantly, we're the right fit for them. And I'm not going to let somebody come aboard that we can't solve their problem. That's not a service to them or to my team.
Definitely. Great stuff. Well, I appreciate it, Steve. Yeah, make sure and go to ApparatusTeam.com. Tell them you heard about this on the podcast. And Steve, thanks again, man. This was fantastic.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
All right. If you want to clean up your books, if you want to have the clarity that leads to the confidence that Steve talked about, and if you want to grow your business and you think that the Apparatus team might be a good fit for you, then be sure to go to ApparatusTeam.com. And I can vouch for them. I've known Steve for a couple of years now. They actually handle my bookkeeping, and I refer a lot of my clients to the Apparatus team as well. Be sure to check out those other resources that I mentioned earlier on. And if you could leave a rating or a review, if you get some value out of this podcast, or you know of somebody that could get some value out of it, if you could share that with them and or leave a rating and a review on the podcast player of your choice, that would be fantastic. I really appreciate it. If there's anything I can do for you, you can find me over at constructionleadingedge.com if you want to get your hands on some free resources. There's some stuff over at buildermasterclass.com that could be helpful for you. As always, thank you so much for listening. My name is Todd DeWalt, and I will see you next time.